Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to see you here today. We're going to talk about some pesky punctuation marks today, starting with hyphens and dashes. So I'm happy to have you all here to talk about especially hyphens, which often frustrate us as writers. If you're anything like me, you've felt that way about this punctuation mark a little bit. Feel free to pop any questions into the chat while I'm talking. I will try to keep an eye on the time here. We're doing a quick pop-up workshop here today, so I will try to stay efficient here as we're talking about this subject. So we're going to start with talking about the hyphen. As I'm sure you know, hyphens are joiners. They join words. They join compound words and parts of words. And so we do have different situations in which hyphens are used, but compound words are one of the more common situations in which you would use a hyphen or not use a hyphen. It's interesting to think a little bit about compound word groups. They work together as a unit. So you're joining two words to express some concept or specific idea. And I had not thought of it this way until I read about how compounds can consist of nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And it's interesting to note that if you have compound nouns, like the word grapefruit, that type of combination is often going to be one word, no space, no hyphen, grapefruit. If you have compound verbs, those often are going to be two words, no hyphen, but a space in between, such as if you say you have to iron out the details or that the children act up when you take car trips. Those are compound verbs, two words, no hyphen. And of course, this is not always the case with these. It's just that often it's the case. So then we get to our compound adjectives, such as saying something is fast-paced or brand new. Those words often do require a hyphen. So it's kind of helpful to think about if you've got two nouns together, they're often just one word. If you've got two verbs functioning as a compound, they're often two words. And if you have compound adjectives, they are often hyphenated. Not always, but often. So I find that kind of helpful to think about as I come upon these in things that I'm reading or copy editing. So we've got some examples here on this slide, a lot of different ones. And of course, there are thousands and thousands of examples that we could look at. But here we do have some hyphen use with prefixes such as ex-boyfriend, semi-pro football player, pre-1960 values. So that's a common time for a hyphen to be used. We also have, if you look at the left-hand column down to near the end, we have if somebody gives you an I told you so look, that would be an example of a coined compound, meaning a phrase that someone coined. Those words are all meant to function as one unit, and so we would hyphenate those. And then we also have at the bottom of the list what we would call a suspended hyphen, the 5 or 10 minute break, where you wouldn't need to say the 5 minute or 10 minute break. You can use that suspended hyphen. So there are some other uses of hyphens. Usually the ones that mess us up are those compound adjectives, compound verbs, compound nouns. Another thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of our words are what we call closed or solid compounds, such as notebook, rowboat, fundraiser. Um, those are all one word. We also have open compounds, such as living room, hard drive. Those are known as open compounds. And so no wonder hyphens are confusing to us. Um, it kind of depends on how the compound works in a sentence, but it also depends on conventions. Sometimes hyphenated words or non-hyphenated words sort of become commonly used, and then they end up in the dictionary that way. And so we kind of have to look at several different factors when we're trying to decide, do I hyphenate or not? Is this one word? Is this two words, etc.? So it's kind of interesting. Um, so hyphens, yes, can be confusing. Um, Conventions change. The rules seem very inconsistent. There isn't an actual specific rule that says absolutely always hyphenate this kind of word. You know, what we do instead is we generally try to use a hyphen when it makes the meaning of the sentence more clear. The problem there is that sometimes we might think, a hyphen would make this word more clear or this sentence more clear, but the dictionary says I don't hyphenate. There are situations like that. So what I always remember is that if you're not sure about hyphenation, look in the dictionary. Here at Allegory, we rely heavily on Merriam-Webster. And what you can do is check the dictionary. Often the word, whether it's hyphenated or a closed compound or an open compound, will be in the dictionary. And then this is how I spell it. If it's not in the dictionary, for example, the term running shoes, that's not in Merriam-Webster dictionary. That tells you that if it's not there, it's going to be an open compound. It's just two words. And I did a little digging into how Merriam-Webster decides these things. And the reason they don't put a term like running shoes in the dictionary is because it's an open compound. Also, you can look up the word run or running, and you can look up the word shoes. And when you put those two words together, those definitions don't change. And so they figure that this doesn't warrant its own entry. And so, like I said, there are, some confusing parts about hyphens, but the dictionary is always going to be a great resource. I look up compound words all the time in my work. I don't memorize them. Why would I? There are so many and the rules are inconsistent. I look them up over and over. There are some that stick in my mind. For example, the word goodbye is a compound. Merriam-Webster prefers it to be all one word, a closed compound. A lot of writers put a hyphen in goodbye. So words like that. But if you think about it, over time, sometimes the hyphen becomes permanent or it is removed. So, for example, the word tomorrow used to be hyphenated, but with consistent use over quite a long time, sometimes those changes do happen. So, Merriam-Webster hyphenates the term ebook, but a lot of other style guides do not at this point. Um, Merriam-Webster does, I think they do not hyphenate email anymore. That's one that by use over time and it becoming so common, the hyphen just got taken out. But if you look up a word like e-bike, which is a little bit probably newer of an e word, Merriam-Webster tells you to say electric bike, and they list the hyphenated e-bike as a variant. So that will probably change over time and with use. So a lot of these are just really interesting. I would kind of feel the urge to separate shipbuilder, but it's a closed compound, so no hyphen, no space. So there's just so many little things to think about here. Okay, so when do we not use hyphens? With adverbs ending in ly. So, for example, the chef is highly respected, the mailing list is widely distributed, a smartly dressed young couple, etc. You would not use your hyphen there. But remember, there are some adjectives that end in ly. And so, of course, if you said, I took an early morning walk wearing my foot-friendly shoes, those compounds, early morning and foot friendly, are compounds that are working together to modify the noun walk and the noun shoes. And so you would hyphenate those. We also do not typically hyphenate compounds that occur after a noun. So whereas we would say he wore an emerald green tie, if we said his tie was emerald green, we would remove the hyphen. And I won't go ahead and read each of these examples. They're all very similar, but those are just things to remember. And there are further reasons why hyphens are frustrating and confusing sometimes. Okay, so hyphen issues. So in this example, players must pick up a medical form before tryouts. In this case, the words the pickup acts as a verb. And so you wouldn't hyphenate it when it's a verb. You would just have it be an open compound. Players must pick up. Interestingly, as you know, the word pickup, as in pickup truck, is a noun, and that is a closed compound. So if you're referring to your pickup truck or, a person that is picked up, let's say you picked up a hitchhiker and you called them your pickup, that would be a noun. So, the English language always has to add more and more confusing things for us to decipher. Similar thing here, let's sign up for the early class. The words sign up act as a verb and shouldn't be hyphenated. Also correct if you said the sign up sheet is in the office, then the compound sign up serves as an adjective modifying sheet, and it does need a hyphen. So you can think about how your compound is functioning in a sentence. Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? What's it doing in your sentence? All right, a couple more. Ages always kind of mess people up. It seems like this is a tough one. If you say Audrey is almost 15 years old, almost 15 years old is what we call a subject complement, which is a word group that follows a linking verb and describes the subject. And we don't hyphenate these. So Audrey is almost 15 years old should be an open compound in that case. But if you use your compound adjective, my 15-year-old dog, where 15-year-old is working as an adjective to modify the noun dog, then you would use your hyphens in that case. Okay, so we're going to move on to the dash. I think I'm doing okay for time here, maybe a little behind. The dash, totally different punctuation mark. We have kind of an opposite function too, whereas the hyphen is more of a joiner, the dash is actually more of a separator. It can show a connection sometimes, but usually it will separate words, indicate ranges, signal a pause, things like that. So we have two kinds of dashes, the M dash and the N dash. And I love the history there. The reason they are called the M dash and N dash goes back to, early printing press days where the width of an M was wider than the width of an N. And so the dashes actually matched the width of their corresponding letter. And so that's where that originated. And then interestingly, when the typewriter was invented, there was no place on the keyboard for an M dash, so people would just use two hyphens. And now, of course, you all know, I'm sure that Microsoft Word will autocorrect your two hyphens into an M dash, or you can type an M dash on my keyboard by doing Shift Option hyphen. You can type an N dash just doing Option hyphen. Here in America, we don't use the N dash as often as we use the M dash. But I did want to mention that the N dash does mean two. Its main use is to connect numbers and words. If you said Monday through Friday, chapters 14 through 16, etc., the N dash is technically the correct mark of punctuation. Now, a lot of us would just use a hyphen, just type a hyphen there. I don't know how often, especially if we're being informal, we would in America actually bother to make an N dash. I know I don't very often. But interestingly, the Chicago Manual of Style, in its most recent edition, does say that we should use the en dash between personal names to clarify that the names belong to more than one person. So for the Ollie Fraser match, you would use the en dash as opposed to, say, someone's hyphenated last name. You would just use a hyphen. And so that's kind of a distinction there. Is anyone really going to notice if you threw in a hyphen instead of an en dash? Maybe not. But in British English, somebody would notice because they use the en dash like Americans use the em dash. So they use it in running text in all the ways that we would use the em dash. Interestingly, too, they use a space on each side of the en dash, while in American English, we don't. We just put the text, we omit that space around the em dash. So I didn't want to leave the en dash out, but it is not one of American English's main punctuation marks, I wouldn't say. I don't mean to hurt its feelings or disregard it, but we do use the em dash a lot more in American English. The em dash can replace commas, parentheses, colons. It can even replace a semicolon at times. First, an em dash can be used kind of in place of parentheses, like in this example from Eudora Welty, where she's kind of including that little aside question in em dashes. Now, she could have easily put parentheses as well. Sometimes it's more of just a personal choice, but I would say in general, dashes will provide more emphasis on what they enclose than parentheses. I read somewhere that parentheses are more like a whisper, but em dashes are more like a more blatant statement. So there is I guess you could say they have a different vibe sometimes, right? Sometimes they're just totally interchangeable. Other times it's kind of a feeling that they give. So sometimes you can emphasize explanatory material by enclosing things in em dashes here. Somebody might argue, wouldn't the parentheses work just as well? Yes, they probably would. So you could also use commas because em dashes can often replace commas. Sometimes you just want to use one em dash to emphasize material at the end of a sentence. So here from Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, we have this sentence. Other than that, you know nothing, just the name, and it's an odd one. She's talking about her husband's name here. In that case, the em dash is sort of replacing a colon, maybe. It's just showing in her informal tone a pause, or it's also kind of indicating what follows the em dash is going to explain what came before it, which is sort of a colon's job too. So it's just a stylistic choice, really. And then in our bottom sentence, most people would say Labradors are easy dogs to train, but they never met our Millie. In that case, that em dash serves a little bit more of a purposeful, um, it has more of a purposeful job. It is showing contrast. It's really pointing out a contrast. And so in that case, it works pretty well. Um, could have just used a comma there, would have been fine. But that em dash sort of points out the contrast. And then a bottom example here, I don't know if that shows for all of you. It doesn't show for me. But what we're doing there is, oops, I'm sorry. We're marking a sudden change in tone. So this is what em dashes can do in, I would say, the more creative writing world, the fiction writing world. It can almost add to the suspense. It's kind of a replacement for that noise in movies that goes dun dun dun, that noise. It can sort of do that in writing sometimes too. Okay, so moving forward, we've got some em dash issues here, and I now am definitely running a little shorter on time, so I'll try to to zip through these efficiently here. Here we have an M dash that's introducing a list, which is like what a colon can do. The problem I would say here is that we don't need both the word like and the M dash. We just need one or the other. So depending on, what you would want to do there. I don't know that the M dash is warranted. You're not trying to do the dun 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 thing. So you probably could use a comma and it'd be fine. Okay, so how about this one? If too much exposure to negative news stories makes you feel depressed or anxious, and why wouldn't it? Try going on a media fast. So what we have there is this little insertion of a comment, right? Could be in parentheses, but it also could be, surrounded by the M dashes. And then you just don't want that question mark and comma bumping right up next to each other like that. It makes the whole sentence feel kind of confusing. And so the M dashes here kind of provide some structure to the sentence, I would say. Okay, so this one, this M dash issue, it's not an error at all. It's just maybe a preference thing. So what we have here is an intentional fragment, broken promises, petty rivalries, and false rumors. And intentional fragments can work very well. In fact, this one kind of does work well, I would say. But if you're somebody that doesn't care for them, or maybe the writer has used too many of them, or whatever reason, you might decide I'm going to throw an M dash in there. It not only connects the two, it connects that intentional fragment with the complete sentence after it, but it also provides sort of that nice abrupt stop between the list and the rest of the sentence. So you could certainly do that. I would say no to a semicolon here. You could use a colon there, but a semicolon requires a complete sentence on either side of it. And we don't have that here. So that would not be a good solution there. Okay, so one more. I was planning to go to the store, but then I realized I forgot my wallet. Okay, so I would say this is an example of just unnecessary M dashes. However, that does depend on the context. Is this some really suspenseful scene? What's going on here? Or is it just simply, I was going to do this, but then I realized I forgot my wallet. So I don't know if those M dashes are warranted. You might just want to use a comma with the two independent clauses. How about this? Maybe you do want to show, for some reason, you want to emphasize that you forgot your wallet. Maybe it's a piece about someone's increasing memory problems. And so they do want to highlight that they forgot their wallet. How about something like this? What if you really are in the midst of a suspenseful scene here? I slammed the car door thinking I'd escaped the killer, but then I realized I forgot my keys, right? So then the M dash serves as sort of that uh-oh feeling, and it provides that abruptness and that kind of a vibe to the sentence. So sometimes M dashes, there's just no reason for them. Other times they really work pretty nicely. I think I have a couple more here. We're just going to click through these fairly quickly, and you'll receive this after the workshop so you can look at them. There's just an awkward extra comma in that one. You could use parentheses. This last one, I'm going to click through these very quickly because I've got several options that you could do. And the main point with this example is just that sometimes using dashes might be just a preference of yours, or avoiding dashes might just be a preference of yours. There are lots of different ways to use these dashes. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this, but I thought this was kind of fun for you to take a look at later when you receive the materials. It's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek look at what too many M dashes can do. And of course, I think we could all agree that, this is too many, and this writer, Noreen Malone, purposely did it. And so, of course, I had to highlight all of them just to kind of share that with you. I thought it was cute. Okay, so we have a little bit of time here. I think I kept it within our pop-up time frame. Just wanted to throw in a little plug for us at Allegory Editing. We offer all of these services. I have our contact information here, my email, etc. But maybe now we can talk a little bit and share some thoughts about this lovely punctuation mark. I see there's a lot in the chat, and I'm guessing that
Um,
Elena will help.
yeah, one quick question, and I think you can stop sharing the screen if you want to
Okay,
let
I will.
everybody
Yeah.
come on. We have
All right,
a
everybody.
question. Can you
Stop.
clarify in act up how up is part of the verb? Can you clarify that real quick?
Well, it's just more of a well-known phrase. And so together we just treat it like a verb, an action
Yep.
that's being done. So
Yep.
I, yeah,
I think that'll answer the question. If not, they
yeah.
can pop it back in. Nancy's got her hand up. Nancy?
Yeah, the word in French, it's madam when it's abbreviated, MME, and then I don't have, and then I'm just using the person's last first initial, so MME, and then the capital C period. Uh, I'm told that there's no period after MME, the French madam. Am I clear on what
Yeah,
I'm
that,
trying to
that
say?
makes sense. I don't know. I'd have to look that up myself because I don't know the answer. So I'd have to go dig for that and um, make sure of what that is. Does anybody in the group know? Somebody put
So
a funny comment.
could I email you at Allegory
You
with
sure
that?
can. Yeah, and I can help you figure that out. I mean, it might just be a matter of Googling. Do I need a period at the end of the abbreviation for madam or
Well,
mademoiselle?
I could have done that myself,
Right.
but I'm getting different responses. I've looked
Oh,
at the chat. I try to
mhm.
do my homework before I ask questions,
Right.
and I just need to be sure because this is
Okay.
This is
Great. We're
America.
kind of short on time, Nancy, so go
Okay.
ahead and send her an email. That'll be
Yeah, send me
perfect.
an
Yeah,
email.
send her an
It's
email.
going to be a matter of, you finding sources you trust and then making a decision, or maybe a publisher would decide for you if they have a style guide, something like that. So, but yeah, we'll keep going.
Right. Other questions?
I'm gonna,
I just want to say this was great, Amy. Thank you. I never got the
oh, you're,
distinction vibe-wise between the M dash and the parenthesis, but now I do.
yeah.
Very clear. That was very cool.
Oh, am
Yeah.
I cutting out a little bit? James, you cut
Oh,
out a little bit when you were saying that, but I think I got the gist of it. Yeah, I think sometimes it is a vibe thing.
Mhm. And I would add on, James, that things that are quicker moving tend to lean towards M dashes, and things that are slightly more funny or academic lean towards parentheses. Like there's even a little bit of a genre thing. We see a lot of M dashes in like suspense and things where we're kind of
mm,
moving forward, kind of action. And then sometimes material, like I'm talking about fiction now, material in parentheses can be funny. Like it can almost be like
uh,
an aside. So there's even a little bit of sort of humor. Amy, would you agree with that?
I would. And then I also want to mention something really important, at least from my standpoint as a copy editor. If I'm looking at somebody's piece and they don't ever use M dashes, then I'm going to think is that's not really part of their style. So I'm probably not going to be popping a bunch of those in there, unless I feel like, oh, they do seem to use this now and then. So, I'll go kind of follow that. So some people just don't like them, dashes. So,
On that note, could I ask a question about the semicolon? I never really
yeah.
understood the purpose
Yep.
of a semicolon. And
Yeah.
in my manuscript right now, I avoid them because I don't understand why I would want
Yes.
to use them. I just
Mhm.
start a new sentence. So why would someone opt, and I see it all the time, and I'm always like, why didn't you just start a new sentence? So why is the preference to use a semicolon at times?
Okay, I love this question because I love colons and semicolons. The semicolon, I always use this visual in my head of the scales of justice, like the metal scale with the two little cups hanging from chains. Does that make sense? And I picture that I've put one independent clause in one of these on one side and another independent clause on the other side. And so they're equal. They're equal in importance, these two sentences. And they're also related to each other. They're connected, like they go together. And so I don't want a period between them. I want to show that they're of equal importance and they're also connected. So that is the reason for a semicolon.
Okay.
In a broad sense,
Yeah,
right?
that's linked somehow. Okay.
They're connected is the main reason you'd use them. And then you need a complete between or on either side of the semicolon, you need a complete sentence.
Got it. Thank
That's
you.
another thing to remember. Yeah. So now you can use them, right?
We'll see. We'll see. I'm
Yeah,
not
you'll
sure
see.
about
Take
it.
it slow. Take it slow. Maybe you don't
Well,
want
I'll add one or two. Yeah.
to.
Although one thing that Amy and I actually talk about quite a bit is that semicolons in dialogue create a visual stop, which you may not want.
Right.
So it's also be thoughtful about how you're, if you're using them in dialogue, just know that your reader's eye is probably going to find that as a visual
Yeah.
stop.
It does kind of stick out. And so to connect two sentences that could use a semicolon, you could use an em dash. Or maybe the person just pauses as in a period there, but I think that's true that they look funny in dialogue. A colon looks kind of funny in dialogue too, I would say. Yep.
Right. We're kind of coming up on our time, but are there any other last questions? Otherwise, I'm going to turn off the recording. If there's anything you wanted to ask and didn't want to have recorded, we're happy to do that as well. So for right now, to finish up the recording, thank you all for being here, and we'll be sending out the link to this and to the handout later on today when it's finished processing. So let me stop the recording.